All right, welcome back to the morning show here on Arise News. Now, this week's allegation of sexual harassment leveled against Nigeria's Senate President Godswill Akpabio by Senator Natasha seems to have reawakened public consciousness about the plight of women in lawmaking and governance, as well as the overall rights and privileges of Nigerian women. From the impassioned public debate a few years ago about the propriety of injustice in conceding 35% of all elective and appointive positions to women, Nigeria currently boasts of just 4 women on the floor of the Senate and a similarly much scaled-down number of female members of the House of Representatives, going by figures from the last 2 general elections. Many have blamed this situation on a perceived lack of interest on the part of the women to take part in politics, while a different argument is being pushed by those who say the Nigerian political system is rigged against their chances, despite their unmatched profile in most cases across all walks of life. We're now being joined by broadcast journalist and founder, Purple Women's Foundation, Ireti Bakare-Yusuf, to have a look at whether women have done enough to seize the moment when provided, and if there's a need to begin to talk about new rules of gender engagement, even as Nigeria continues to fiddle with her nascent democracy. Good morning, and great to have you on the morning show today.
Morning, ladies. It's great to be, and I'm glad this is all women. Sorry, Steve.
Right?
Yes. Great to see. And you are the hero. You were the hero of yesterday. If I may just start with that, because your response, your retort to Senator Ireti Kingibe, that it's about seats, and she tried to minimize what was clearly about the visibility of women for women at the assembly. That's why where they sit matters, because you've just talked about how there isn't enough women in our democracy, in our political landscape. We talk about this all the time. We talk about the UN Charter. We talk about how Nigeria signed on to it. And then the only 4 women that you have, we don't see them. So yes, it's not just a case of seats, it's about visibility. And it is rather unfortunate that we have a senator such as Senator Ireti Kingibe. It's sad that she bears my name, actually, but that's a whole different story altogether. But it's sad that not only was she incoherent yesterday, but she doesn't understand the importance, the critical importance of being seen as a woman. So, which then takes you on to that whole thing where it's not every woman who should be where they are. She's forgotten that Senator Natasha, what has she had? Probably 12 years of trying, being abused, being maligned in Kogi, having the road to our constituency dug up by the former Governor Yahaya Bello. She's had threats to her life, yet this woman did not give up. She was determined, she was focused, she was undeterred, and she continued and continued. She persevered until she got there. It is sad that somebody like Senator Ireti Kingibe, who clearly only just got there like that, doesn't appreciate the struggle of her colleague. But what's even worse, and this is on a personal level, is the infantilization. We do this in Nigeria. We call, they'll call the leaders, he's the father of the nation. Akpabi is the father. Well, no, I know who my father is. I'm sure you know who your father is. The president is my president. He is not my father. The president is responsible for the nation. He is not the father of the nation. That is how we constantly project the powers that we have as citizens onto leaders who are working for us. But sadly, Senator Ireti again was so unintelligent yesterday that she kept referring and infantilizing Senator Natasha as my daughter. She's my daughter. No, she is not. She's your colleague. You are both senators, albeit, yes, you're older than her. And yes, we do have a culture. We have a culture that's in any part of the world. And it's not just Nigeria. You respect your elders. I worked with people, I have managed people who could be my grandfather, right? But they would never dare refer to me in an office or in a meeting as their daughter. That'll be insane.
I'd like to come in there just because of the points that you've made, and really just coming from the reactions that we've seen since that, you know, the accusations were made by Natasha here on Senator Natasha here on Friday. Now, first off, we're seeing Senator Ireti Kingibe coming out and saying, you know, it's about the seat. You know, she could have just gone to her own seat. We're seeing the Senate President's wife coming out and saying, I know my husband. He's a good person. He would never sexually harass anybody. I'm always in the house. I know everything that is going on. And we also now have the side of persons who are saying that there have also been people who have falsely accused men of sexual harassment only to find out that it didn't happen, but then the damage has already been done. How do we balance out, you know, these kind of reactions, especially when it's a he said, she said situation, without the proof that I guess if we take to the court of law that needs to be there? How do we manage these kind of sensitive situations when it comes to sexual harassment, especially in the workplace against women?
Okay, so the first thing you do is, whilst we can acknowledge that human beings lie, literally, human beings lie, that is a fact, it's part of the foibles of being mere human. That might be a fact, but it is a tiny percentage that lie about rape, that lie about sexual harassment. Why? Because one of the hardest things to do is to come out as a woman and point to a man and say, you are the person that abused me. You are my abuser. You are my rapist. No. Women, you can see yesterday when Senator Natasha was on this show, on this at the station, you could see the heaviness in her voice. You could hear it, right? She was wearing sunglasses, but anybody who is discerning would know that there was a lot of pain going on behind those sunglasses. Even more so is, the moment a woman speaks up, she becomes even more vulnerable. So it's one thing to be vulnerable and be abused and you're dealing with it at home and you cry, oh by God, you cry. But it's another thing when you then come out to the world and you say, this is my vulnerability. This is what is hurting me. This is what this man did to me. So when people say, oh, you know, we hear of lies, yeah, well, you know, our politicians lie to us all the time. You know, hardly any of them ever go to jail for lying to us. So that's that. Now, going back to your other question about proving sexual harassment, this is also the other thing that I have been trying to educate. I'm tired. A large majority of very, very, very ignorant men, all of yesterday, is that the hardest thing to prove is sexual harassment. Why? Because the power of sexual harassment is the surprise, random, unexpected nature of it. So I didn't come here thinking anybody would sexually harass me. You don't go into your boss's office thinking you're going to be sexually harassed. But then it happens and you're in shock. You don't know what to do. So how do you prove that unless there was a witness, right? So if there's nobody there, well, of course it's he said, she said. This is why it beholds on all of us to actually, when it comes to these sorts of allegations, we are trained to always believe the woman first, not because we are sure they are telling the truth, but because when you say to somebody, I believe you, it's like your child. When you say, I believe you, it then gives you an opportunity to investigate. Because if you literally dismiss what they're saying, then you're not going to get a chance to investigate. So we really must applaud, I personally applaud Senator Natasha for her courage, incredible courage, especially in her position, for coming out, especially in a country like ours, especially in the cesspool that is a Nigerian sexual harassment epidemic. We do have an epidemic of sexual harassment and rape in this country. In actual fact, before I move on, I think we're at the point, as a girlfriend of mine said to me yesterday, and she too had been through that we need to declare a state of emergency because it really is that bad. And it takes a woman, a really courageous, intelligent, sharp, determined woman like Senator Natasha, an Amazon, to come out and say, it has happened to me. Think of Weinstein. It took one actress to say, me too. So are we at the point where we're going to say, hashtag Akpabio me too? And Akpabio doesn't necessarily mean Akpabio the person, because he's not the only person that's called Akpabio. But that name, because you have a Senator Natasha who was able to point to say, this boss of mine allegedly did this to me, then Akpabio, the name Akpabio easily can become synonymous with sexual harassment and the declaration of war on sexual harassment.
While we're on that, because, you know, one of the biggest talking points at the moment is that, okay, fine, well, we've only heard one side of the story.
Correct.
What do you want to see happen? What are the next steps that, if I may call it, a sane climb, we would see taking place so that there can be justice, fairness, so this issue can be resolved in the correct manner?
Excellent question. Sorry, I didn't finish answering Shaitan's question because she did ask about the wife.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Wives, it's okay to defend your husband if that's what you believe. You know, I understand that. After all, we're all women, right? It's love and all of that stuff. But it is pitiful when you say you are going to sue the accuser of your husband when the accuser didn't accuse you. It is pitiful that while she may have been at the house on that day, and Natasha told us her husband was also at the house, she certainly wasn't in his office when he did it the second time. So what is she going to sue about? What? Stand by your man? I don't know. Anyway, going back to your question again, please ask. Oh yeah, you said what do we want going forward?
What
Excellent question.
Yeah.
What makes sense is investigation. Look, we can't keep having women literally coming out in spite of the abuse they're going to receive, because from yesterday, men, really stupidly ignorant men, had already started going on about Senator Natasha's history. Well, I dare them to ask their mother if their mother doesn't have a history of boyfriends. And why does it matter? Why should we care what a woman's history is? The fact of the matter is, whatever your history is, it does not invalidate that experience that she is claiming at that time, which is why we must investigate. How do we get a really sort of fair and decent and trusted investigation? The Senate president has to stand down. There's no other way, because he cannot preside over a case that's actually where he is the named perpetrator, allegedly, right? He can't. So at this point, we need the Senate president to stand down. At this point, I call, and I know that many Nigerian women actually agree with me, we call on President Bola Tinubu to actually do the needful. They need to advise the Senate President, Senator Godswill Akpabio, to stand down until the investigation is corrected. Because, Mr. President, you have an opportunity to change Nigeria. You're doing a lot of reforms, but this is a reform that's generations old, that should have happened. At this point, sir, we need you to stand up for women. Talk to Mrs. Remi Tinubu, your wife. She will assure you that many women, the chances are, and I don't have the stats here, but you speak to 20, 30 women in a room. 99% of them would have experienced one form of sexual violence or the other at least once in their lives. We're talking about sexual harassment. Sexual harassment is why all the reforms you are doing, Mr. President, is actually not going to get very far. Because unless you stand up, sir, and you protect and speak up for women and say, the women of Nigeria come first, whatever you're doing, we're really not going to get very far.
And just to, take this from another angle as well, because some people might say that, is this how we're going to do it? Does this mean that women who've experienced this or allege they've experienced this should now all come and report on public platforms? Why was the correct process not followed? Why was it not reported? Why did it? Surely there's a way that these issues are handled within the Senate. Was the way it was managed? Well, this is what I'd like to know. This is
the question.
Yeah.
Are there? I'm wondering, because it's interesting that you ask. Senator Akpabio kept going on about the rule book when doing their row at the Senate last week, the Thursday before, right? But I'm wondering, in that rule book, is there such a thing? Are there rules against sexual harassment, intimidation, how you speak to staff, how you treat staff? Because if I may share a rumor, our National Assembly is known to be a cesspool of all sorts, all sorts. So where was she supposed to report? That's number one. Number two, a friend of mine, I had many women calling me yesterday, obviously because of the work I do, in addition to my journalism. A friend of mine told me yesterday, in the public sector was when it happened to her. And yes, she reported. This is an answer to all those men who are saying, why didn't Senator Natasha report? Why is she only just speaking out now? Well, my girlfriend reported. She reported to the next in line and the one above them. And you know what they told her? It's impossible. He's a pastor. He couldn't possibly. And they did nothing about it. So even when women, the majority don't report, because even when women do report, here you go. Where's the proof? How do you prove that somebody slapped your bum? How do you prove that somebody said, come and meet me at the hotel? A friend of mine once went to do a presentation to a big MD in this country. She got there, all dolled up, you know, as we do, business presentation, in a suit and everything. She got there. Hello, sir, good afternoon. He said to her to sit on the table in the corner. She did, which was the meeting table. Do you know what he did? He came from behind and unzipped his trousers. Sorry, who was she supposed to report to? So that's why I'm calling on the president. The only way we can fix this is for the president to mandate the Senate, in fact, the whole of National Assembly, for this investigation to happen. And then they need to invite women who are experts in how you implement these things to come and implement a sexual, you know, sort of sexual harassment training. We've had gender training at NAS. You know, you've had gender training at the CBN under SLS. These trainings are important. We're not saying they're going to solve everything overnight, but they are a start. Because often, a lot of men don't, and there are good men. Oh gosh, there are good men. And that's the thing, when you get good male allies, they literally, that's why she probably couldn't tell her husband, because men work with ego, right? So they literally take it personal, like, why, how dare you? But the majority of men do this. And the majority who do this, there's also a percentage of them who don't even know that they are actually behaving in a sexually... Somebody sends you a naked picture of themselves. He will say, it's just a picture now, right? Somebody sends you porn, and you're offended. They say, it's just porn. Now, what is your own? So you can just delete it, right? They don't know that sexual harassment comes in many forms. What Senator, and I must go back to her, what Senator Natasha Akpoti said yesterday is one of the most egregious forms of sexual harassment. It's in your face, you know, but there are those who are, we all know when a man is standing in front of us and undressing us, right, with his eyes, right? How do you tell anybody that? I mean, try going to HR and saying, hey, look.
Well, I mean, I was reading the statement that was put out by the Proper Women's Foundation, strongly condemning and describing what happened to Senator Natasha as entrenched misogyny and deliberate exclusion of women. And we'll just continue to follow up on this case and see exactly what happens. But we really appreciate you coming into the studio today, Ireti Bakare-Yusuf, a journalist and, of course, the person behind the Proper Women's Foundation. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.